Has anybody else been following the Regular Cars channel on YouTube and on other social media for this crazy sort of trajectory it's taken? I know that I feel very validated for enjoying his channel early on because I'm a bit into cars. I enjoy that kind of stuff, right? But to find out that he is, in fact, gay and a furry is like the most validating thing I've ever gotten from the algorithm. And one thing I would like to try to mimic myself is some of the financial advice he does in Fursuit. I'm probably a lot dumber than he is, but that's okay. I'll carve out my niche. I can talk about financial well-being and what that means here in Canada, which honestly is pretty similar to what it looks like in the United States or anywhere else in the world. And I'll have to pull up some graphs and charts and various accompaniments to explain the ideas in more detail at some point, but for now, we can run over the basics. So if you are trying to have a greater sense of financial well-being and you actually want to be smart with your money, it comes down to a few steps that you can follow. First and foremost, the idea that you need to spend less than what you can earn is at the front of all these issues, and people say, but I have too high a cost of living. My rent is too high. My mortgage is too high. The price of gas is too high. The price of food is too high, which are quite valid. The prices of those things are pretty expensive. But what exactly can you do about those things? The answer, at least in a direct sense, is nothing. So, instead of just saying you don't have a chance, we need to figure out some kind of strategy. And it's not pretty. I mean, lots of people do live with roommates. They try to split the cost of living amongst other people and try to find power as a group. And that can look pretty ugly depending on how many people you have to stay with and cram into a space. All the weird cost-cutting measures one can implement to create that margin in their lives. It gets to the point where one of the easier things to do, and I say easier, but it's not easy necessarily, is to simply increase your income potential, which may come down to education, although that hasn't really panned out for myself and lots of other people who are university educated. It might come out down to just seeking opportunities and doing things that other people don't want to do. The trades are quite popular at the moment, although you would like to find maybe an apprenticeship or get in with a union if you can. Those are the more difficult ways to go, but I got in that way when I started doing framing carpentry. When I got out of university, was not unionized. I probably could have done better for myself, but that's what I was able to achieve. So, you do those things and you create the margin. There's sort of this financial order of operations to follow. The first one is to essentially have some savings put aside, something that keeps you from going back into using things like credit cards or other types of debt. If you can fund yourself through an emergency, if you can fund yourself through, say for instance, all of the deductibles on insurance or a couple months worth of living so that whatever that is, it could be $2,000, it could be $6,000, whatever it is, that's the amount that you need to save up and have as what they call an emergency fund. There are interesting things that might be the second step for you. If you are lucky enough to work someplace that has an employer match contribution to something like your TFSA or RRSP or something like that, then you should probably use that. I know in the United States it's your 401k, and I have no idea what the programs look like in Canada because I have never been lucky enough to work for a company like that. But I know some people do have that available, so they should look at it and max those out because honestly it's free money. And then the next step for most people is tackling high interest debt, paying off credit cards or other loans that maybe exceed somewhere in the realm of 6% interest, because those are very much stacked against you. And there's different ways to do it. You could logically pay down the highest interest debt first, because that will save you the most money in the long run. Or there's what they call the snowball method, where you pay off the smallest debts first, because then the payments you're making towards that debt could be snowballed into other debts later. And it's not necessarily about spending the least money on interest, it's more about the psychological factor that reinforces you to upkeep a good behavior. And say, for instance, you get all of that done. Well, now you're in the territory of being able to do some miraculous things with money, because you have an emergency fund and you have no high interest debt. You might still have a mortgage, you might still have a very low interest car payment, something along those lines, but don't worry about those just yet, because you have the power of interest on your side. Compound interest, which is the best kind. You can invest your money into something that will give you a greater return than low interest loans will take from you. People usually will start out in Canada using something like the Wealth Simple banking application, and it's a pretty good way to do it. There are other options too, but through that you can put money in, use it like a bank where there's even a debit card if you want it, but you can buy index stocks like the S&P 500 and other index stocks with your money as investments and watch them grow over time, which historically has grown at about 8 to 10% per year on average over the last 100 years. Not a bad return, if I do say so myself. And these things are more powerful than you might imagine. Something like investing $30,000 to $40,000 in your early 20s could honestly make you a multimillionaire in retirement. But of course, you're not necessarily going to do this all in a lump sum. The idea is the habit. Whenever you get paid or find a way to invest some money, you want to do it on a regular interval. Maybe it's $200 or $300 a month if you're young. Maybe it's a lot more if you're already in your 40s or 50s. The power of time and compounding interest are the most powerful things. Of course, I can show this a lot better when I have some kind of charts to back myself up, because honestly, I'm just uttering nonsense at this point, right? I am not a bird that doesn't want you to be poor, but I am a dog that doesn't want you to be poor. I'm going to revisit this later when I have a better filming setup and I have my eyes fixed, because honestly, looking at the bottom of my muzzle is probably not the because it is so much